Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer Monday afternoon briefing with myself, Liam Bryce, welcoming back Craig Nisbet, also known as 9125 Analysis on Twitter. Craig is upholding what is now becoming a real tradition on the Hibs Observer to only have him on after really bad results for Hibs. Yeah. So, I mean, he's a real kind of trooper in that sense and continuing to turn out for us when he only gets to analyse defeats. Hopefully, that theme of last season will not continue on too much further. So I do apologise yet again, Craig, for not getting you on after any of the 2 5-goal victories. But hopefully we'll have more to come through the season. But I mean, apart Saturday aside, how's it going? How have you been? Glad to be back.
Glad to be back, but listen, if the Hibs Observer want to fund me to stay out in Japan for the remainder of the season to ensure a top 6 finish, then I'm absolutely fine with that. So.
I'll ask, mate. I can't make any guarantees, but I will ask for you. Today sponsored obviously as always by MPH Group and Weissman Boilers. We're going to take a look back at the 1-0 defeat to Kelty Hearts at New Central Park, and also just get from Craig a bit of broader insight into David Gray's tactical approach so far. We'll touch on a wee bit of today's breaking news, which was obviously these comments that have filtered through from Bill Foley claiming that Hibs are not, as much as he would like, are not listening to the input of the Black Knight group. So we'll touch a wee bit on that, get Craig's perspective as a Hibs fan, and then, we'll just take it from there. But first, let's rewind, and I suppose get it out the road. Rewind to Saturday in Kelty. A first defeat for David Gray as Hibs head coach, going down 1-0 to Kelty. A second half goal from Callum Flatman. It was just a poor day at the office for Hibs. A lot of chances going begging. There came a point in the game where a bit of time to go. I started to get the feeling that it's just not going to happen at all today. There were 6 changes to the team. As I said, chances going begging. Kelty basically having. They had a couple of chances. Maybe I'm not saying that they had one chance and scored, but they took their big opportunity when it came along, and full credit to them for doing that. Former Hibby Scott Allen, of course, he was going to be involved in the goal in some way. So, I mean, for you were there. How was it from your perspective? Does it particularly worry you, that result, or are you looking at it from the perspective of, well, on another day Hibs could have scored 4 or 5? Are you somewhere in the middle? What's your overall feeling?
Yeah, I think on the way there, obviously David Gray made 6 changes, which, at the time in the car on the way through, I kind of thought, well, I kind of understand that, if we win this game, the group's done, we can kind of look forward from that. And actually for the fringe players, the players who haven't been given so much minutes, you want to give them a meaningful game in pre-season. I think the other side to that argument is go with your strongest 11, get the job done, and you can play the fringe players on Wednesday against Watford. But he's maybe thinking, actually, no, come on, go out, show me what you've got. Let's put this team away. We should have enough to beat them, and obviously get minutes into the legs and things like that. And actually, rewatching it, I think it's pretty obvious. We just missed so many chances, and it doesn't really matter, in my opinion, what level opposition you're playing against if you continue to do that all game and you don't have enough attacking depth, which we don't have. Like you say, Kelty, I mean, they defended phenomenally well, some great last-ditch tackles, some really, really good defending, really well organised. And similar to you, I just felt after, I think, Molotnikov hit one over and Venti hit the post, I thought this is just not going in, and actually we don't have much off the bench to change it, and we just ended up falling a bit flat towards the end. So it was really, really disappointing, especially I think in the first half when we were completely dominating things. We just couldn't get the ball in the net. But the squad itself and those players that came in, and we've only made a few signings, so that squad of players is still quite fragile. They're still the same group of players that conceded goals late in games, that struggled at times against opposition. So it was maybe just a little bit of a reality check, I think, on kind of where we are.
Yeah, I think what's kind of become more evident since that result was probably in those first two games, the importance of getting an early goal, because when you're the Premiership team and all the pressure's on you, it kind of releases that tension a wee bit. And I felt like I don't the kind of early stages of the Kelty game, I felt like it, in a way, it sort of mirrored, I think, the Elgin game as well to an extent, because I didn't think Hibs were great, but they did enough up at Elgin to at least get their noses in front, and it just completely changes the picture. So I don't think you could actually argue they probably created more chances against Kelty than they did against Elgin, especially in the first half. So I don't think it followed too dissimilar a pattern. It's just the importance of getting that early goal, and then, as you say, there's kind of probably still a bit of psychological frailty in there. That's not going to just be wiped out overnight and by a change of manager and a few weeks break and back into pre-season. It's going to probably take time to eradicate that. And the kind of holes in the squad, the deficiencies in terms of depth, kind of it was an off day for Dylan Vente, and then you don't have another striker on the bench to come on and try and change it from that perspective. I mean, of the 6 guys who came in, do you feel that anybody kind of caught the eye at all? I thought it was maybe a kind of difficult day for a few of them, but just interested to get your perspective on the guys who came in.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the change, obviously Smith. I think like Smith and Rocky coming in, I didn't think that I think they were okay changes because they don't they wouldn't be in a game that you would expect they would have too much to do. I thought Rocky was fairly solid, and obviously Smith, I mean, had a couple of routine saves and just picked the ball out of the net really. After that, I think I thought Megwa actually in the first half in particular, we had a lot of joy. O'Hora switch of play, that was kind of our thing that we did all game, getting McCurdy and Molotnikov on the ball and Megwa there. I thought he did really, really well. I just still felt that we missed like a natural left-sided player there. There was a few times the ball went out, and you would imagine if that was Obita, the ball getting whipped in straight away and maybe causing a few more issues. When you play a right-sided fullback, left-back, sometimes they struggle to go down that side and use their weaker foot. And then after that, like Levitt, I thought was when I watched it live, I didn't think he'd done particularly well. Rewatching it, I don't think he did anything really particularly wrong. It just was, there was like a lack of he wasn't just as dynamic and kind of taking the game by the scruff of the neck. He had a really good effort in the first half, this maybe towards the end when the goalkeeper made a really good save. But he just wasn't getting on the ball enough and making things happen. And I thought Amos really struggled. I wasn't sure it was after he got the ball to the face early on, but his range of passing was out. He, hit a few out kind of without having any pressure on him, and just then seemed a bit cagey about playing forward and things like that.
Yeah.
And he had a good counter attack and sort of looked like he was running through at least to have a shot, and he played like a really poor pass. And then finally McCurdy, obviously he was, he nice wee flick in the box and dragged one across just past the post, and then obviously hit the bar. I think everyone's willing for him to get the first goal and get a bit of luck. But again, apart from a few flashes, there wasn't much there in the first half. So I don't think any of them particularly stood out to sort of say to David Gray, right, I deserve a place in the starting 11, to be honest.
Yeah, I suppose if we're maybe going to look at positives, I'd probably highlight O'Hora. I thought he was good again. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't, again, I don't think he's had a real sort of stern defensive test, but I think you can tell that he's going to be useful in possession. You could see, I think, in the first 2 games that he's comfortable taking the ball, combining with people. But I think you maybe got a wee look on Saturday that he seems to have a decent range of passing, because like that, the long diagonal was always from his side. It was always right to left. Yeah. And it must have been about 4 or 5 times where he's put it on a plate for whether it was maybe McCurdy or Molotnikov. So again, that could be a decent, avenue for Hibs going forward, because I think it was a really narrow pitch on Saturday, and I don't know if it came across, if anybody's only seen the highlights, but when you were there, you kind of really get a sense of how kind of narrow, and it made it easy for Kelty, I think, as the game wore on, to just sit in. And obviously Hibs' threat is I think so far has been kind of down the flanks. They've kind of been getting Martin Boyle into more advanced positions. Molotnikov's been kind of drifting around, but he picks up good areas as well. And it's made it difficult for these guys to get any sort of space, especially as the game wore on. So I think maybe was that kind of that direct switch. You might see more of that in certain games because I suppose it's a way of getting the ball into the final third quicker before teams really have that chance to drop everybody back and pack them in. So I mean that was perhaps the thinking there. But just maybe getting back to my original point, I thought I was quite impressed with O'Hora and how he executed that and just kind of his all round performance. You can tell he's a leader as well. I think it's those grounds where you can hear pretty much everything that's going on in the park. I think it's always him that's directing traffic. He's always organising. So I think if you're going to take a positive away from Saturday, it's probably him.
Yeah, I think so. I'd be interested because I'm pretty sure in the last two in the games against, obviously when we've changed from playing three at the back, he's normally played like left side, and obviously on Saturday was the right side, so it was a bit more natural for him to hit that diagonal. So I do wonder how they'll utilise him because it's obviously different when he's maybe getting pressed and he's on his left foot. But yeah, I mean, you're spot on. Like you could hear him, dragging the team forward, encouraging, leading by example. He had a really good shot in the second half. The King took a wee deflection. The keeper made a good save, and then his rate. I mean, there was a point where I was like, he's our only like creative output at the moment. Like I'm sure he also played a really nice little ball over for Martin Boyle. And behind maybe when it got cut back to Molotnikov, but again, like a really deft, like little touch over the top, and it was a really narrow pitch, as you said, and he was probably throughout the game the only player that kind of came away with pass marks, and certainly looks like he's a good signing.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, at least one positive to take from what was not a great afternoon. So, I mean, obviously, I'm still kind of favourites to progress through the group. You think, at 9 points will be enough if they can get a result against Peterhead at the weekend. So, just taking it, a bit more generally over the past three games, from you being able to sit down and analyse and look back over it, watch and rewatch, what has kind of stood out to you as to what David Gray is trying to implement? What kind of changes and tweaks have you noticed?
Well, he's obviously. I mean, he spoke, I think, in the interview with the Observer about wanting a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and not wanting to rely on one shape, and it's been interesting. Obviously, there was the sort of 3-5-2 setup, like three centre backs, one being sort of Lewis Miller, which makes sense because if Cadden's fit down that side, then you've got almost like two fullbacks there potentially being able to drive out with the ball, and and that's gives us a really good option, and I definitely could see that. When they played PAOK in the friendly, you could see that being a really good system, maybe against Rangers, Celtic, maybe away to Hearts, things like that, where you're soaking up a bit of pressure and then you can just utilise the pace and the speed in behind with maybe Boyle, and you've got runners like Campbell, Molotnikov, people that can carry the ball. So I've quite liked the look of that. I know some people think sort of like three at the back and it can be maybe a bit too defensive, but I actually think the way we're utilising it is that we're just having an extra bit of structure at the back, and then actually we're kind of really giving the fullbacks license to go. I've noticed this season as well, we've not really played with two deeper line midfielders. It's just been one. It's like Newell kind of been there, and it's quite. We've seen like Mariah Welsh playing a bit higher up, Amos, Molotnikov playing much further up and getting closer to the strikers, and Campbell as well, which we've seen makes a difference. Campbell slid in, got a couple of assists from those more advanced positions. So I quite like the look of that. Obviously, with Cadden picking up an injury, then do you play Miller as a wing back and put Rocky in the defence and Ekpatita out there? I don't know if that's maybe how if he thinks that's going to work. You certainly would lose that sort of dynamic sort of speed across that right hand side. But I think when we've looked I was looking at the shape and trying to, obviously when you're talking about shape, it can be like the numbers don't really matter, but it's kind of almost in some of the games anyway, more like a sort of like a 4-1-2-3. Like we've kind of had the back four, one sitting midfielder. The two midfielders have been sort of let like loose to go forward a bit, and then we've got like that front three that are kind of moving across the front line and rotating and things like that. So like especially against Queen's Park, like I really enjoyed the way we played and the way we looked, and certainly Molotnikov out there on that left-hand side with Obita overlapping. It was like a really nice, I thought they were like good foil for each other. And I did think we lost a bit of Molotnikov in that, playing him just back in midfield a little bit. Like I like him out on that left-hand side. So, there's been wee tweaks like that to the shape. And I think as well, there just seems a real emphasis on sort of pressing as a pack and hunting the ball down. And listen, Montgomery wanted to do that. He spoke about that as well, but it always looked quite disjointed. And, Venti running about, just doing shuttle runs everywhere. But it now looks quite organised, and you can see that, when Venti starts, Campbell or Mariah Welsh or Amos, whoever's in, that they are kind of pushing, they're making a bigger effort to force the ball wide and then get really, really touch tight and trying to turn the ball over, which, when Hibs have had their success, like under Jack Ross, that was what we did. We were a really good counter-attacking team because we have pace and speed, and that seems to be what we have this season. So I think David Gray's come in, and he knows the players inside out. He's seen different managers try different things. So I feel like he's probably taken little bits of each, plus put his own sort of maybe more pragmatic approach on it. And, he's wanting us to go in with these two different setups that can, so that we can match up against different teams for different situations.
Yeah, you just touched on young Molotnikov. I think you're spot on in saying that. I think he didn't get into the game as much on Saturday. Again, it was because of the sort of narrowness of that pitch. You stick him in the sort of middle of the park where there's a lot of bodies. Obviously, you've got Hibs midfielders pushing on as well. It seems to be when he was getting joy, he was kind of coming out to that left hand side, as you say, like kind of picking up that wee inside pocket. He seemed to have, the first two games, he already seemed to have a sort of decent understanding with Jordan Obita. If one goes inside, one goes round the outside. But just general, I mean, I talked about him with Patrick on here the other day, so just kind of interested to get your thoughts on what you make of him so far. For me, he looks like a really sort of comfortable technically. Everything that he does is quite smooth, and he sort of looks just as if he feels comfortable in the first team and playing at that level. Obviously, you're going to maybe have days like Saturday where he's not as involved because he's only young. You'll need to have patience with him. But I mean, he's been a real kind of, I mean, anybody who's probably watched the academy team with any regularity will have known about him. But he's been kind of, he went out still in Albion, didn't really get involved there. So to see him over these past few weeks has been a kind of good, pleasant surprise, I suppose, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think he's been fantastic. He just kind of got that like no fear. I think he's got an incredible first touch. There's a few times he's received some pretty wayward passes that he's able to sort of kill the ball, and he's always just looking to take people on. He's always looking to, if he's not on the ball, he's looking to run in behind, or he's looking to come and take it to feet. And I actually said to my mate on Saturday, he's kind of got a bit of the, and I say this like tentatively, like a bit of the McGinn about him in terms of how he wants to hold the ball up, and he's happy to take the, the pressure, get a defender, let them get touch tight to him and try and roll them and things like that. Like the physical side of things, he's definitely got, which is important. Like you can see that, and I know McCurdy's had health issues and things like that, but you can just sort of see the difference with the ball going out to him and him trying to hold the ball up compared to Molotnikov at just such a young age and just the way he's built. And as you said, he seems to that kind of forward left wing sort of attacking role. The link up with Obita, even him and Campbell, seem to have like made quite a good wee understanding quite early on. And he's just sort of moving around the pitch with like a real freedom, and it looks like a player that's been in the first team for a long time. And I do. Like I'm hopeful. Like he keeps that going. But you're spot on what you said. Like he's a young guy. He's going to have tough games, especially when he comes up against better opposition, because he's not had that test yet. So we need to manage him carefully and certainly potentially get reinforcements up in that sort of left side area anyway. But he certainly looks like an exciting prospect for the season anyway. Yeah,
definitely. And you've kind of touched on it there. Where I was going to take is next, just reinforcements. I think if there's, it was kind of Saturday's not, I suppose, in some ways hasn't really told us anything particularly new about this squad, but again, it does kind of underline and highlight the need for more attacking reinforcements brought in. David Gray was speaking about it on Friday before the game, talking about how he would like just a different a different sort of profile, a striker, an alternative to Vente. I'm assuming he wants other options across the forward line as well. I don't think you can, it'd be a real gamble to maybe go in and, say, right, Milotnikov's first choice at this stage. That's probably not going to happen. So, I mean, just for you, the forward areas, obvious ones for reinforcements, but when you kind of look across that team, where do you still think that it's a bit short?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the manager. We need that different profile. I did actually. I know I'm not going to go back and talk about Lafondra again, but I did think having an option like that off the bench would have been ideal for the weekend. Yeah. But and I know we were linked with Simon Murray. I don't know how close or not that came to happening, but we need because Vente, he's coming obviously back from injury. He's coming back from found it difficult, settled in this season. Last season, but he's got no competition. You know what I mean? And I think you need that as a player to kind of spur you on and keep you on your toes. And at the moment, he knows that. And when he's having an off day, he kind of had a wee bit off in the sort of last game, and certainly on there. It's I can see why the manager doesn't want to take him off, because you're taking off your only striker when you're needing a goal. So I definitely think there was a bit of fatigue maybe on his part, and I think if we had another striker in, I think Vente probably would have been on the bench on Saturday, I could imagine. Yeah. So I think that has to be the priority. And yeah, you would like it to be a slightly different profile, maybe somebody a little bit. It still has to be mobile, I think, for the way we're playing, but certainly somebody maybe a bit bigger, where you can maybe start to go a little bit longer if you need to, and certainly instead of firing the ball across the box or trying to cut it back, you can maybe hang one up in the air, maybe for somebody to attack. And I think you're right as well. Obviously, without you've got Boyle. Obviously, Yuan was injured on Saturday, and there's still maybe question marks about his future. I think if he was to go, I think we need two sort of wide players. Certainly one left-sided, and maybe somebody else that can play across the front line. If he stays and you've got Milotnikov and we've got Boyle, you probably would want another wide option, I think. And I know Jair came on and did okay and nearly got an assist for Vente, but I still think there's big question marks over his ability to do it in the top league. And McCurdy, I don't know really enough of how they have to manage him. I'm sure it's obviously quite a delicate process to manage him back to playing and getting his fitness up and even trying to build strength and things like that. I can imagine it being quite complex. So I don't know how much game time or things he'll be getting this season. And that's probably where we hit the nail on the head in terms of a problem, which is then it's just bloated, because it's difficult to probably move these guys out to get these other players in. So a striker first and foremost, and if we hold on to Yuan, maybe one more. If he goes, I think we have to get two more sort of wide attacking options in.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, to be honest. But it's I think, as you say, there is the stumbling block potentially, the bloatedness of the squad still, and it's something that we know that's not going to be solved in a single summer when there are still guys who are sitting with a year left on their contract who are under kind of no obligation and potentially no hurry to go elsewhere. So, I mean, but there's still time left in the transfer window. It's definitely going to be an interesting 5 or 6 weeks or so until that closes up. But just before we call it a day for today, obviously the kind of news coming out from down south, Bill Foley has been given an interview to the BBC, kind of wide-ranging interview, a lot of it about Bournemouth and his plans there, but it does touch on Hibs with some really kind of interesting comments that I want to get your perspective on. Obviously, Foley and his Black Knights group, as everybody knows, have a 25% stake now in Hibs, and they are Hibs have moved into their sort of portfolio of different clubs. So Foley today, he's basically asking Hibs to be the kind of leadership at Hibs anyway, to be more receptive to the ideas and the input of the Black Knights. If you've not read the thing in full yet, you can see it on our website, but I'll just maybe paraphrase a wee bit of it for you just now. He was asked about the defeat at the weekend, and Foley said, "I'm absolutely looking out for them. If the other ownership group at Hibernian listens to us, they will do better. So far, they haven't really been listening to our input. I believe they will listen to our input now." So, I mean, for you to get a fan perspective on that, does again it's hard. I think I don't want to make any real kind of assertions about it either way when we don't kind of have as it stands Hibs perspective on this. But I mean, are you concerned by those sort of comments coming from Foley, or do you feel, and I certainly do feel, that it maybe needs a bit of context as to what these conversations taking place actually are? Because obviously we knew there was going to be a lot of change at the club this summer. Obviously that's happened with Malky Mackay coming in, David Gray being the manager. I mean, we don't know exactly what Bill Foley's talking about here. There is a vagueness to it. So I mean, what do you make of it as a fan?
Yeah, I mean, it's not great reading, and it's like a pretty good headline as well. I think you're right. It's the context more than anything. I don't know what he goes on to, I think, talk about the team playing similar styles and all that kind of stuff as well. So I'm not quite sure of the context, if it's regard to choice of manager, choice of signings, if it's something to do with the commercial side of the club or whatever. But what I would say is, I think, where the club were at the end of last season with Montgomery, I think we were, we've tried numerous times now different identities, and we've never stuck one out and we've never saw one through. And we've tried the young manager, we've then tried the manager from abroad with a set playing style, we tried the manager with loads of experience, and none of it's really worked. And there's obviously other factors coming into that, but where the club were, I think having Malky Mackay come in, Park, I know it's difficult for fans, but apart from the stuff that's gone on previously with him in terms of his stature and his contacts and where he is in Scottish football, it was a good appointment on that front. And then bringing in and then giving David Gray the opportunity, and him bringing in guys who have been around the club or know the club, I think that was an okay move, and I think that's probably where we are and where we need to be, and we're kind of going through another redevelopment, another rebuild, and I would probably prefer having Gray and Mackay, sort of at the helm doing this at the moment. And if Bill Foley's alluding to a potential manager or a sporting director or whatever saying, would you prefer this? I'm kind of okay with how we've handled things at the moment. I think, maybe in a year or two's time, and maybe once we've established ourselves, maybe back in the top six and maybe a bit more consistency, then we should be leaning into their contacts and portfolio and maybe starting to make adjustments. But I would worry if we try to do all of that, take on their perspective and point of view, as well as trying to get players away from the squad, bring in signings that are ready to go, get into the top six, get a good cup run, all of that. And I just think that would be too much. And I think we'd struggle massively. So, I think we need the context of it, but it's not something that hugely worries me. I think if they're saying this in a year or two's time, then that is a big worry. But I think we probably need to be pragmatic at the moment.
Yeah, aye. Inclined to agree with you. I think we'll call it there for today. I think we've covered everything that we came on for. Folks, kind of more reaction from the weekend coming on our website later on, and then we're obviously building into the friendly against Watford this week, and then I nearly said off to Peterhead on Saturday, but I've checked that one 1,000 times. That is definitely at home. There's not another Elgin-esque trip on the calendar just quite yet. But thanks to Craig for joining us. As always, some really good insight there into what David Gray is trying to implement, what the squad still needs, and a kind of balanced fans perspective on these comments from Bill Foley, and we'll bring you more on that if we can through the week. But thanks as always for joining us, folks. You can still access our £4 for 4 months offer. Just go to hibsobserver.co.uk/subscribe to get access to all of our content. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please do consider hitting the subscribe button to help us keep on growing the channel. So hopefully have a good rest of the week. We'll be back before the end of the week anyway, but have a good one for now, folks. Thank you very much as always for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.